Every morning, Arjun woke up with the same thought: maybe tomorrow will be different. He'd promise himself a fresh start, to wake up early, exercise, eat right, and focus at work. But by the end of the day, his energy was drained, his mind cluttered, and his goals postponed yet again. His phone buzzed with endless notifications. He scrolled through social media for just 5 minutes, which turned into an hour. Deadlines slipped. Habits broke. The cycle repeated. And every night, he felt that heavy mix of guilt and exhaustion, the quiet whisper that said, "You could have done better." Sound familiar? Maybe you've been there too, promising yourself a new routine only to fall back into old patterns. You want to be consistent, focused, healthy, and disciplined, yet something always pulls you back. It's not that we don't have the motivation. It's that we often build habits the wrong way, expecting giant leaps instead of tiny steps. And that's where Atomic Habits by James Clear begins its quiet revolution. This isn't just another self-help book. It's a blueprint, a science-backed path that shows how tiny changes can lead to remarkable results. Welcome to Top Summary, where you learn from successful people, transform your life, and see your growth unfold. If you're new here, we bring you inspiring book summaries and practical lessons to help you grow faster and live better. Arjun didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change, not because of a grand plan or a big motivational event, but because of a few small, quiet decisions that would eventually shape who he became. Arjun worked at a multinational company in Mumbai. His job paid well, but it demanded constant attention, meetings, reports, late-night calls. He'd often joke, "My life runs on caffeine and chaos." But beneath that humor was fatigue. He'd set goals to read more, exercise daily, start a side project, yet none of them lasted. Every time he failed, he blamed himself. "Maybe I'm just not disciplined enough." One evening, after missing yet another gym session, Arjun sat on his balcony, looking down at the traffic. He felt like one of those cars stuck at a red light, waiting to move, yet somehow trapped. That's when his friend, Ria, called. They chatted for a while, and in passing, she said, "Hey, I just finished this amazing book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's all about how small habits, when done consistently, can completely change your life." Something about that sentence stuck. Arjun had read dozens of motivational posts before, but this felt different. He ordered the book that night. When Arjun started reading Atomic Habits, the very first idea hit him like lightning. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. It wasn't about having big dreams. It was about building the small daily systems that make those dreams inevitable. James Clear called them atomic habits, tiny routines that compound over time, just like atoms combine to form massive structures. Arjun realized that his focus on motivation was misplaced. He didn't need more inspiration, he needed better systems. He thought about his mornings, how he'd aim to work out but kept his gym bag buried under his bed. He decided to change one tiny thing. He'd place his workout clothes right beside his bed every night. The next morning, when his alarm rang, the clothes were right there. He didn't argue with himself. He didn't think. He just wore them and walked out the door. It wasn't a huge workout, just a 15-minute jog. But that small action made him feel alive again. That's when he understood the first core truth from Atomic Habits. Big changes start small, with actions so easy that you can't say no. As Arjun continued reading, James Clear introduced the 4 laws of behavior change, the habit loop that shapes everything we do. Cue, craving, response, and reward. Arjun started observing his own loops. He realized every time he felt stressed, he opened Instagram. The cue was stress. The craving was escape. The response was scrolling. The reward was temporary relief, followed by guilt. He decided to flip the loop. Next time he felt stressed, he'd take a short walk instead. At first, it felt forced. But after a week, the walk started giving him the same relief the scrolling once did, minus the guilt. James Clear explained that the secret to changing behavior isn't fighting your old habits. It's replacing them with better ones that serve the same need. That one realization felt like a mental reset button. One night, while sipping tea and highlighting passages, Arjun came across a line that would redefine his life. The ultimate form of intrinsic motivation is when a habit becomes part of your identity. He paused. For years, he'd said, "I want to be fit." Now he asked himself, what would a fit person do? It was such a small shift from wanting something to being someone. He didn't need to run a marathon. He just needed to prove to himself every day that he was that kind of person. He started small. A glass of water after waking up, a 5-minute stretch before work, packing his lunch instead of ordering takeout. Each tiny act was a vote for the identity he wanted to build. And slowly, Arjun began to see himself differently. He wasn't trying to change overnight. He was becoming someone new, one habit at a time. Weeks passed. The small changes began stacking up like invisible bricks. His mornings felt calmer. His focus at work improved. He was no longer driven by guilt or pressure, but by pride. James Clear wrote, "Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement." Just as money multiplies through compound interest, your habits multiply through consistent repetition. The earlier you start, the greater the rewards. Arjun realized that every action he took was either a vote for his future self or against it. There was no neutral decision. He smiled, remembering his first tiny jog. Now, it had become a 30-minute morning ritual. Not because he forced it, but because he became the kind of person who doesn't skip workouts. Arjun wasn't perfect. He still had lazy days and distractions. But every time he stumbled, he knew exactly what to do. Return to the small habits that anchored him. 3 months later, Arjun's friends began noticing something different. He looked more confident, more relaxed, more present. When they asked what changed, he just smiled and said, "Nothing big, just small things I finally stuck with." But deep down, he knew it was more than that. It was a transformation born from invisible progress. From tiny, consistent efforts that rewired his identity, focus, and confidence. And through that journey, Atomic Habits by James Clear became more than a book. It became a mirror, showing him that greatness isn't built overnight, but moment by moment. If you're listening right now and feeling that same sense of frustration Arjun once did, remember, you don't need a massive change. You need one small, atomic step today. Arjun's mornings no longer began with the snooze button. They began with purpose. The clothes laid out beside his bed reminded him who he wanted to be. The jogs that once felt like a task had turned into quiet meditations. His days were still busy, but something within him had shifted. As the weeks passed, Arjun started noticing how his environment influenced his behavior far more than his willpower ever did. One evening, as he sat reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, he came across another insight that made him pause. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. He thought about it for a moment. His home was filled with cues that pulled him in the wrong direction. His phone charging on the bedside table, snacks beside his laptop, notifications pinging every few minutes. No wonder his focus drifted so easily. So, he made a few subtle changes. He left his phone in another room at night and bought a simple alarm clock. He placed a water bottle on his desk and kept healthy snacks within reach. The junk food? Hidden in a top cupboard, out of sight. At first, these felt like minor adjustments. But soon, they began steering his actions without much thought. It was as if his surroundings were silently nudging him toward better choices. He realized the truth of James Clear's words, "You don't have to be the victim of your environment. You can be the architect of it." Each change made the next one easier. The fewer temptations in sight, the fewer battles he had to fight. Arjun wasn't relying on discipline anymore. He was designing his environment to work for him. A few days later, Arjun sat with his notebook, listing the habits he wanted to strengthen. He wanted to meditate daily, read more, and stay off social media during work hours. But he knew that setting big goals wasn't enough. He remembered another concept from Atomic Habits, habit stacking. The idea was simple. Link a new habit with an existing one. He smiled at its brilliance. Instead of forcing himself to find time for new routines, he could attach them to what he was already doing. So, right after his morning jog, he'd meditate for 5 minutes. After his lunch, he'd read a few pages of a book. Before sleeping, he'd write down 3 things he was grateful for. Each habit flowed naturally into the next. It didn't feel like work anymore. It felt like rhythm. Over time, these small rituals became part of his day's melody. There were still moments when he slipped. An evening spent scrolling through his phone, a skipped workout, a night of fast food. But instead of self-blame, he now saw those moments differently. James Clear's words echoed in his mind. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. So, whenever Arjun missed a step, he made sure to get back on track the next day. No guilt. No drama. Just quiet consistency. One afternoon, during a particularly stressful work week, Arjun found himself overwhelmed again. He'd been managing deadlines, client calls, and endless emails. For a brief moment, he felt that old urge to escape into distractions. But this time, he paused. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "What would the best version of me do right now?" That one question changed his response. He closed his eyes, took a 2-minute break, and wrote down his next small action. Instead of getting lost in chaos, he began solving it one tiny step at a time. It reminded him of something James Clear had written. Focus on getting 1% better every day. That single percent didn't look like much, but it carried power. Small gains compounded over time, turning into something extraordinary. A month later, Arjun noticed how people around him were reacting. His colleagues commented on how calm and focused he seemed. His manager appreciated his consistency. Even his family noticed that he laughed more often now. When his friend Ria asked what had changed, Arjun smiled and said, "I started trusting the process." That's the thing about habits. Their results are invisible at first. You don't see them growing, but they are. Just like bamboo that spends years building roots before it shoots up, Arjun's progress was happening quietly beneath the surface. Halfway through his journey, Arjun had a moment of realization. One evening, he was journaling, reflecting on the past few months. He saw how much his daily life had transformed, not because of motivation, but because of structure. He whispered softly, "This book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, didn't just change what I do. It's changing who I am." He leaned back, thinking of all those days he'd felt lost, all those mornings of guilt and self-doubt. Now, things felt lighter. He didn't feel like he was chasing success anymore. He was building it, brick by brick, one habit at a time. And if you're listening right now, maybe this is your reminder too, that you don't need to start big. You just need to start small and keep going. If you enjoy our top summaries and storytelling, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this with someone who might need it today. These stories are made to help you grow, and we've got some bonus takeaways coming up at the end. Now, let's get back to Arjun's story. One of the toughest battles Arjun faced was breaking bad habits. He realized that quitting a habit was never about willpower alone. It was about removing the cues that triggered it. He had learned from James Clear that if you want to break a bad habit, make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. So, Arjun deleted the social media apps from his phone's home screen. He turned off notifications that distracted him every few minutes. And he set up small barriers, logging out of accounts, moving apps to hidden folders, so that every time he reached for distraction, it required effort. At first, he felt restless. But over time, his urge began to fade. Every time he resisted, he strengthened the muscle of discipline. He replaced wasted time with things that truly mattered. A call with an old friend, reading a chapter of a book, a short walk during sunset. The peace he found in those moments was worth far more than the short bursts of dopamine he used to chase. And that's when Arjun finally understood another powerful truth. The real reason we struggle to change is not because we lack motivation, but because our systems are built around old patterns. Once he rebuilt those systems, change became natural. Now, his days weren't perfect. He still had deadlines, pressure, and unpredictability. But he had built something stronger, a foundation of habits that held him steady. He could feel the difference in how he showed up every morning. He felt present. He felt alive. And most of all, he felt in control. One evening, as he closed the final chapters of Atomic Habits, a deep sense of gratitude washed over him. He realized that the book didn't give him shortcuts. It gave him something more powerful, clarity. Clarity that change is not a one-time event. It's a continuous process. That success isn't about intensity, but consistency. And that each small habit is a quiet vote for the person you want to become. Arjun looked out at the city lights through his window, the same view that once made him feel stuck. But tonight, it felt different. He wasn't waiting for life to change anymore. He was building it, one habit at a time. Months had passed since Arjun had started his journey with Atomic Habits by James Clear, but it felt like years of growth had been packed into those days. The small changes that once seemed insignificant had now become second nature. He no longer had to remind himself to go for a jog, meditate, or plan his day. Those things happened automatically, like breathing. The real miracle wasn't that Arjun became more productive or fit. It was that he became more peaceful. He had learned to trust the slow, steady rhythm of progress. The anxiety that once ruled his mornings was now replaced with quiet confidence. Each sunrise felt like an invitation to improve just 1% more. At work, his performance began to reflect that inner calm. His manager noticed how consistent and reliable he'd become. Arjun no longer chased big wins or last-minute bursts of energy. Instead, he relied on his daily systems, the structure he'd built patiently over months. One day, during a team meeting, his manager said, "Arjun, you've changed a lot lately. What's your secret?" Arjun smiled and replied softly, "Small habits. That's all. Just small habits that compound over time." And it was true. He hadn't done anything extraordinary. But that was the beauty of it. The transformation didn't come from one big leap. It came from hundreds of small, quiet steps that no one noticed except him. In Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about the plateau of latent potential, the phase where progress seems invisible. Most people quit during this stage because they can't see results right away. But just like ice that melts suddenly after reaching the right temperature, results appear only after enough small changes accumulate beneath the surface. Arjun had lived through that plateau. There were days when he saw no difference, but he kept going. And eventually, the ice cracked. He understood now that habits weren't about perfection. They were about persistence. The goal wasn't to be flawless. It was to be consistent. To show up, even when you didn't feel like it. His evenings, once filled with endless scrolling, were now moments of peace. Sometimes he read a few pages from a new book. Other times, he simply sat with his thoughts, watching the sunset fade beyond the buildings. There was a quiet satisfaction in that simplicity. He thought about how far he'd come since that night when Ria had first mentioned the book. That one conversation had led him here, to a life that felt intentional, stable, and full of quiet purpose. And maybe that's what James Clear meant when he said, "Every action you take is a vote for the person you wish to become." Arjun's life wasn't transformed by luck or chance. It was shaped, day after day, by those small votes. By choosing progress over perfection. By trusting that tiny habits could build extraordinary change. As he reflected on his journey, Arjun realized that success doesn't come from massive overhauls. It comes from small decisions repeated over time. It comes from believing that small things matter, because they do. He opened his notebook, where he'd once written his goals in big letters. He turned to a fresh page and wrote 3 short sentences. Small habits. Big results. Lifelong growth. He underlined the words and smiled. Because now, he understood. If you've been listening to this story and thinking about where to start, here's what Atomic Habits by James Clear teaches us. Start small, ridiculously small. Want to read more? Start with 1 page. Want to get fit? Start with 2 push-ups. Want to meditate? Start with 1 minute. Don't chase perfection, chase progress. Make your environment your ally. Surround yourself with cues that remind you of the person you want to become. Remove distractions, make good habits obvious, and bad ones invisible. Stack your habits. Attach new actions to existing routines. After brushing your teeth, stretch for 2 minutes. After making your morning tea, write down 1 goal for the day. Focus on identity, not outcomes. Instead of saying, "I want to lose weight," say, "I'm the kind of person who takes care of their body." Each small choice reinforces that identity. And finally, remember this: consistency beats intensity. You don't need to do everything today. You just need to do something every day. Change doesn't happen overnight. It grows quietly, like a seed beneath the soil. One day, you look back and realize that the small things you did, the things that once seemed too simple to matter, were the things that changed everything. As Arjun stood on his balcony that night, watching the city lights shimmer below, he took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he felt light. Not because life was easy, but because he'd learned how to handle it with grace. He whispered to himself, "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of who I am becoming." That's the true message of Atomic Habits by James Clear. That growth is not about intensity, it's about consistency. That greatness hides inside ordinary days. And that you already have everything you need to transform, one small habit at a time. If Arjun could rebuild his life from small changes, so can you. Start today. Choose one small action. Take one small step. Because every great story of transformation begins with something tiny, something atomic. And as promised, here are your bonus action items. Simple but powerful ways to apply the lessons of atomic habits in your own world, no matter who you are. If you're a student, start by creating a study trigger. Every day, at the same time, open your books and study for just 5 minutes. No pressure, no distractions. That small act trains your brain to expect focus at that hour. Keep your phone in another room and place your notebook in clear sight. Over time, that 5-minute window will expand naturally. Reward yourself when you finish. A short walk, a favorite song, or simply checking off the task. The goal isn't to study for hours. It's to show up daily until it becomes part of who you are. If you're a working professional, start your day by writing down your one most important task on a sticky note. Not 10, just one. Make it visible. Then eliminate distractions for the first 30 minutes of your workday and focus only on that task. That's how momentum begins. After work, design an evening shutdown habit, like closing your laptop, taking a walk, or reading a page from a good book. This helps your mind separate work from rest and keeps burnout away. Remember, small structure leads to big stability. If you're an entrepreneur or creator, your biggest habit is consistency. Don't wait for inspiration. Design a system that produces creativity. Set a fixed time each day to work on your idea, even for 15 minutes. Keep your workspace ready, remove friction, and make the process satisfying, maybe with your favorite music or tea. Build a win tracker, a list of small daily wins. Over weeks, those micro-achievements become your growth story. As James Clear said, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Build the system that supports your dream. Whatever stage of life you're in, remember this. Success is not about doing more. It's about doing small things that matter consistently. Small wins compound into big victories. Small changes build great lives. So, as you finish this story, pause for a moment. Choose just one habit, one tiny change, and start today. Because your future self is waiting for you to take that first atomic step. That's all for today. We'll continue bringing you top book summaries that inspire change and reflection. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep transforming. Transform your thoughts. Transform your life.